In section 11.2, we were concerned about the difference of means, but for dependent samples. In other words, the data sets were paired up. It was matched pairs data. So you take one minus the other. You take husbands and wives, pre-test and post-test, before Reiki touch therapy, after Reiki touch therapy, that kind of thing. That's matched pairs, and that means that you're doing that particular kind of t-test. But in section 11.3, we're going to be working with independent samples, and that's going to change everything, how we run the test and all sorts of other stuff. So let's remind ourselves what the difference is. So independent sampling is when the individuals in the sample have nothing to do with each other. There's no relationship. You can have different numbers. You could have like 50 in one group, 75 in another. It's fine. Dependent samples, you can't do that. Dependent samples, it's 50 and 50, and they're going to be linked to each other somehow, like husbands and wives, one twin and another twin, or you against yourself, you pre-test, you post-test, things like that. So again, remember that independent samples usually are two independent groups that are measured one time, whereas dependent samples are one group but measured twice. That's why it has to have the same number of people, right? Because it's one group. So we're going to determine whether the sampling method is independent or dependent, and then determine whether the response variable is quantitative or qualitative. So a study wished to compare traditional acupuncture with usual clinical care for a certain type of lower back pain. The 241 subjects suffering from persistent nonspecific lower back pain were randomly assigned, that's interesting, to receive either traditional acupuncture or the usual clinical care, and the results were measured after 12 months. Well, that's independent of each other, right? So because they're randomly assigned, you're putting two groups of people and you're going to measure one time. You're going to measure their pain level after the 12-month mark. So the variable is pain level. There's probably some kind of scale, but we don't know a particular unit. That means that since it's quantitative, you're going to be doing a hypothesis test for the means here. You're going to want to know the difference between the two groups. Now, what about we want to test whether there is a difference in the body temperature of men and women? We collect a random sample of 65 women and 65 men and take their temperatures. Well, again, that's very much independent. They're not husbands and wives. They're just men and women that don't have anything to do with each other. So it's two groups of people measured one time. So they were measured body temperature, right? And that is your quantitative variable right there. It's body temperature. The units for this case would probably be degrees Fahrenheit, right? If you're in America. If you're in Britain, it'll be degrees Celsius. All right, then that means again you're doing a hypothesis test for a mean because that variable is quantitative. All right, now once you know you're doing a hypothesis test for independent means, matter of fact, I'm going to throw in independent means, just keeping that in mind, right? So once you know you're doing that, then you're doing this particular test right here, which is not a test you've seen before. It's the two-sample t-test.